So let's talk about how we read ancient stories. The ones from texts like the Bible. Are they just simple fables with a nice little moral at the end? Or is there something way deeper going on that we might be missing?
Think about it. When you read a story about, say, Abraham or David, what's your first instinct? Is it to just find a quick takeaway like, be brave or have more faith? I mean, is that really all there is to it? Or are we maybe missing the bigger intended message?
Well, here's the challenge. These stories come from a time and a culture that are thousands of years away from ours. It's a huge gap. And according to scholars like Dr. Robert Vannoy, just retelling the story isn't going to cut it. We need a way to bridge that gap to find the more that the text was actually meant to say. So, how have people tried to find that more over the centuries? Let's dive into one of the oldest methods, one that was super common before the Protestant Reformation. It's called the allegorical method. The big idea here is that with allegory, the historical facts of the story kind of take a back seat. Instead, every single person, every object, every action, it's all treated like a symbol, a secret code for some hidden spiritual truth. Okay, let's make this real. Take the story from Genesis 24, where Abraham's servant finds a wife for Isaac. If you read this allegorically, the characters just transform. Suddenly, Isaac isn't just Isaac, he's a figure for Christ. Rebecca? She's the church. The servant is the preacher. And get this, even the camels get a symbolic job. They represent people who need to be taught.
But you see the problem here, right? As Dr. Vannoy points out, this isn't really exegesis, which means drawing the intended meaning out of the text. It's actually eisegesis, which is when you read your own ideas into the text. You might be finding some interesting truths, but are they the truths that this specific story was meant to teach? So if allegory can kind of lead us off track, what about a more, common sense approach? Well, that brings us to our second method, just looking for examples to follow.
Now, this is probably what you're most familiar with. It's how most of us instinctively read these narratives. We look at the characters and what they do, and we treat them like role models. It's all about drawing out moral lessons on how we should or shouldn't live our lives. It's a very practical, do this, don't do that kind of thing.
Let's go back to our Genesis 24 story. Using this method, it's pretty straightforward. Abraham's concern for Isaac's wife, that becomes a lesson for parents. The servant's prayer for help, an example for how to seek God's guidance. And Rebecca's amazing service at the well, a model of great character.
But, again, there's a catch. This approach can be really subjective. I mean, how do we know for sure what's supposed to be an example versus what's just part of the story? And more importantly, it tends to become man-centered. The focus shifts to us and what we should be doing, and we can easily lose sight of what God is doing in His own story. And you can really see the difference side by side here. The exemplaristic view is all about us, which leads to a bunch of subjective do's and don'ts. But the redemptive historical view, that's God-centered. It's focused on His actions as part of a much, much bigger story. And that brings us to the key alternative that Dr. Vannoy really champions. It's called the redemptive historical method, and, you guessed it, it's all about seeing the big picture.
You see, this method asks a totally different question. It's not, what moral can I learn? It's, where does this story fit in God's giant, overarching plan of redemption? Every event is seen as a piece of a massive puzzle that ultimately points toward Christ.
So, one last time, let's look at Genesis 24. But through this lens. The story totally transforms. It's not primarily a how-to guide for finding a spouse. No, it's about God. God is the main actor here, faithfully keeping His promise to Abraham. Getting a wife for Isaac was an absolutely critical step in that promise, the one that would lead to a lineage that blessed the world.
And this is the crucial point. This perspective changes everything. These historical accounts aren't just a collection of nice illustrations for our faith. They're presented as the very foundation of that faith. They tell the story of what God has actually done in history.
And if you want to see why this matters so much, just look at this quote from the scholar S.R. Driver. He basically says the real value is in the moral lessons you can get, whether or not the story even happened. That way of thinking completely detaches faith from history, and it turns these powerful narratives into little more than well-meaning fables. So, does this mean we can't draw any personal examples from these stories? That we should just throw out finding personal lessons? Absolutely not. Vannoy argues for a combined approach that just puts everything in the right order.
It's actually a pretty simple three-step framework. First, always start with the big picture. Where does this story fit in the grand story of redemption?
Second, figure out what God is actively doing in this specific moment to move his plan forward. And only then, as a third step, can we look for examples of how people respond, either in faith or in failure, to what God is doing.
So at the end of the day, the takeaway is this. We absolutely can find powerful, life-changing examples in these stories. The crucial difference is we don't just pluck them out of thin air. We have to see them inside the bigger, God-centered, redemptive story where they belong. And that leads us with one last thing to think about. How does seeing God's big story of redemption completely change the meaning of those individual stories you thought you knew so well? It's a shift from always asking, "What must I do?" to first asking, "What is God doing?" And that, right there, can change everything.